Off we go. Hello, everyone. And this is Past, Present, Future by PARSEC Labs. The intention for this is to actually be a questions and answers AMA kind of call. I was hoping some people join the call already. At the beginning, I want to give a short introduction about what we've done at PARSEC Labs, where we are right now, and what's to come. And then I would like to just spend most of the time on answering questions. So let's get through it on slide 1. Cool. So to those that are kind of very new, to give you an overview of what we're doing, this is our mission. So we try to bring fairness and transparency to gaming. We think like esports, gaming, and entertainment industries, they all have a lack in like fairness and transparency, and blockchain technologies kind of here can change that. We also enable on-chain scalability for game execution. We think that right now the Ethereum transaction fees are pretty high, and that pushes most of the games off the chain. And we think by bringing gaming onto the blockchain, we can kind of unite and open up all these virtual worlds, so there should be no border between the one game ending and the next one starting. That's the mission of PARSEC Labs. And on the next slide, I've prepared kind of a breakdown of what I want to talk about. So the past probably consists of projects we've done before, minimal viable plasma, so the first implementation of a plasma chain that we have done, and a network node that we've created. And on the next slide, I try to break down why do we even want to build a plasma chain? Why do we care about this specific technology? Well, we think there should be like a public good execution venue for transactions that occur quite often, but are not so high in value. So with blockchain technology itself, so far we have achieved these execution environments for high-value transactions, but we think that we can kind of reuse the same security assumptions, but create execution venues for specific industries like gaming. And we specifically focus on gaming because we ourselves had the experience that we developed a game and it was not viable on the Ethereum network. So last year, pretty much the same team has built a product that's called Ace Busters, a decentralized poker platform. And while we were running on the main network, CryptoKitties launched, and it pretty much skyrocketed the transaction fee and made our game unusable and also not economically viable for the players. We think that further, like real ownership of items and currencies will really advance games, and that there will be kind of this second explosion, similar to the ICO wave that happened in 2017. And in the tech market, we think the gaming market can see a similar explosion where indie game developers and game studios realize that they don't need to depend on the big stores for distribution, but they can fund and publish games pretty much independently and create economies that fund their developments. And and of course, all this needs to be kind of safe, transparent, and fair to enable good interaction and, for example, running tournaments and games and so on. Yeah, so to conclude, we kind of think this will create a fast-growing, interconnected, like virtual economy and push blockchain forward. And on the next slide, we kind of try to give a basic introduction to what we have done to create a plasma network that satisfies these requirements. So first of all, we build a proof of stake network, and This proof-of-stake network runs like a sidechain to the Ethereum main network using the Plasma technology. So we have the stake, for example. That's what the validators deposit to be able to propose blocks in the Plasma chain. They run the validator node, which is a specific software, kind of like the Ethereum or the Bitcoin software. And there are blocks produced. And these blocks are aggregated and regularly submitted into their hash. The Merkle root is regularly submitted into the Ethereum chain. And a certain amount of these blocks together we call an epoch. So this is usually the one period in which all the validators are the same, and then between the epochs, the validator set can change. How can the validator set change? Well, each validator, when they want to be able to participate in the continuation of the chain, they need to auction a slot. A slot is your right to propose a block within an epoch. And when you propose such a block, you naturally are the guy that receives the block reward from this block proposal. And with these proof-of-stake incentives, we can kind of do two things. So first of all, we can run a public good Plasma chain that many projects can come to and use, because we are not the only operators. Otherwise, we could kind of censor someone. And if CryptoKitties comes to our Plasma chain, we just say, no, we don't accept your transactions. If you have a set of distributed validators, it is really a promise that there is no censorship. And the other thing that we can do is we can add security on top of Plasma. So Plasma kind of gives you these assumptions that when you check the chain regularly, then it's as secure as on the Ethereum main network. If you see that the operator does something wrong, you just exit. And by creating a proof-of-stake network that runs with its own token, we kind of incentivize the validators to keep the chain running and not stop, because they hold a big share of their investment in this chain-specific token. And if they would make a mistake or actually not correct each other's mistakes to keep the chain alive and clean, then they will lose their stake, because it takes them quite a while to unbond. While all the users can just get out of the chain, sell their tokens, or bring them into security, the validators will be bonded to the success of the chain. And if the chain dies, they die with it. So yeah, that's what differentiates us from other Plasma chains, I think, as well. Next slide. I've talked about this a little bit already, but on the left side, you see that we're actually running faster than the main network, which means that we, on average, produce a block on the Plasma chain every 2 to 4 seconds. And then these blocks are aggregated into what we call a period. And periods, the roots of the periods are submitted into the Ethereum main network. These roots, Merkle roots, are the data structures that you can use to do all kind of proofs on the Ethereum main network about what happens on the Plasma chain. So they're kind of a compressed state of what's going on the Plasma chain. And then let's assume we have 100 validator slots, then 100 periods together make one epoch. So that means that if you bond as a validator, you will be bonded for at least one epoch. And if you make mistakes during that time, your stake will be slashed. I think that was the summary of what we've done in the past. On the next slide, I can introduce the topics for what we're currently working on. So we're currently busy trying to get our testnet up. And in the context of that, we try to introduce some kind of challenges and make people participate in that. We have 2 external companies that are already playing with our testnet, and some independent developers. Our research is not finished in like enabling smart contracts on the Plasma chain. So this is something that we put most effort on right now. This is in collaboration with Ethereum Foundation. They've given us a grant to do smart contract exit research. And one general trend that we are kind of going through right now is opening to the community. So we have bounties, we have taco rewards, and all these kind of things we want to introduce to anyone who comes along and is interested to participate in what we're doing. On the next slide, I want to take you through kind of the things that we want to do to grow the community. So there will be a challenge to run a node on the testnet without getting slashed or without disconnecting. So it's kind of like an uptime challenge. And for that, what we want to do is the best ones we will just want to reward with PARSEC tokens regularly. So, and if you manage to, be online on the testnet for a particularly long time, you might get a slot as a Genesis validator. So that means if once we start the production network, your node will be part of the Genesis block and start validating from Epoch 1. I've also included a link to research, to a research document where there is a lot of bounties described that we're working on right now. So bounties are the size between a few $100s, and I think the biggest one is currently $3,400, and it's up for grabs. So anyone can come and do plasma research, and we're supporting it. And of course, it's not just in isolation. You can anytime come and join our Slack, which is on join.parseclabs.org, and ask any questions and bug us and set up calls. We really like pair programming, so just hit anyone up. And yeah, working by yourself is boring. We like to share the experience. Next slide. Yeah, I mentioned the taco rewards already, but I guess if you haven't read our blog article that Victor recently published about how we work together using these taco rewards, then you probably feel it's kind of weird. But the general idea is everyone can give up to 5 tacos a day in any public channel in Slack. And then we basically just have a metric where you can exchange your first few tacos for tokens, and that you can exchange these tokens for example Ether or stable coin, which is called DAI. And that way there is no central authority who kind of says you did good work, you did bad work, but we all collaborate and kind of help each other, and based on that it's reward each other. Next slide. Yeah, so you can see this is our taco history since 2017. So this is more than a year now that this organization kind of runs on tacos. And there is no HR department or contracts or something like that. So what we just do is we run holacracy. So these are the four circles that you see on the top right. So different groups in the organization, and each group pays in a different way. So the general circle, as I already mentioned, rewards you for tacos. Then we have the research circle, which is giving out bounties. There is a communication circle, which rewards any kind of public speaking and travel for public speaking. And we have the dev development circle, which does, the communication circle does expense reimbursements, and the dev development circle, you can basically just claim time worked on a specific issue. We have issues on GitHub that are marked as claimable, and you can just assign yourself to them, post in the Slack channel, and you get paid. Done. Next slide. Next slide. Cool. So what are we playing for? I already talked a little Snap challenge. So breaks down into two things. One, being able to run a project, and the other is hours. And of course, somewhere in November, we want to be able to launch a production network, which doesn't only work with the Ethereum test network, but actually, into the Ethereum main network where the fees are actually. Next slide. So how do you begin without? Pretty simple. Download the node software. For that, you can go to stakedev.parseclabs.org and check out the latest. You can install simple npm install and copy the file. And the node, once you start the node, it will sync up with the chain. And at that moment, it will display you your signer address, which is basically the private key and address, which does all the signing in the name of this node. So submit the roots to the Ethereum blockchain. You need to fund this key with a bit of Ether, like 0.1 or 0.2, and always keep it funded. And you need to go back to the stakedev page and auction a slot. So you will need some PARSEC tokens for that, but no worries. There is a faucet where you can actually go to and just claim some PARSEC. And then you'll be able to purchase the slots, and you're already validated. The node will just contributing. We'll start submitting periods in the next epoch, and you can just watch your node and make sure it always stays online and is protected from DDoS and all these kind of problems. Cool, next slide. Yeah, I've already talked about auctioning a slot, but what does that actually mean? So the Plasma contract has as many slots as there is periods in an epoch. So that means that every slot has the ability to propose one period during an epoch. And the order of this is random. And every slot is also in a continuous auction, which means if you have more tokens and you're willing to stake them for 3 months, then any of the active stages in the Plasma bridge, you can bet on that slot and kind of buy them out. So that means that let's say we start with empty and you bet on a slot, you immediately become active and you can contribute. But if you bet on an active slot, the slot will be auctioned, and about 1 epoch later, when all the slashing has been done for mistakes of the previous validators, you become the active validator. And then, of course, you can as well log out from your slot if you want to exit, and eventually receive your stake back. That's the whole thing. Next. So this is a little bit about how we want to start the production network. At PARSEC Labs, that's the bubble on the top left. We're pretty much like an open organization with an open source organization that is a bunch of developers that are pretty good writing the code for the chain. But what we are looking for is partners that want to help us educate and market the chain. And the chain works in a simple model. So when a customer, be it a game developer or a game user, depending on the setup, wants to interact with the blockchain, they need to pay a gas fee. It's much smaller than on the Ethereum network, but still there is a gas fee. And when the transaction is sent, then included, this gas fee is burned. So no one receives it. And at the same time, there's the validators, which kind of connect the Plasma chain to the Ethereum main network and create the security of the system. And they receive a block reward. They receive all of the block reward minus a small percentage every time. and they pay the operational expenses and all this kind of stuff. And this small percentage, which we call the block tax, goes to an organization that is the foundation. And the foundation is a non-profit organization that takes care of, continuing the life of the chain by, writing good software. That's probably what PARSEC Labs will continue doing, and to educate and market the chain to users. So there's more and more activity on this. And the block tags will be used for these two activities. Next. Yeah, that is already everything. Thanks for listening, and I'm hyped to answer any questions. Are there any questions? I guess, as there is no one on the call, no question. Should I check YouTube comments for this, or what should happen?
Maybe I can ask one question.
Johann, yeah, go ahead.
When do you predict to launch the PARSEC production chain, like optimistically, pessimistically, and realistically?
I think, good question. I think pessimistically and realistically, kind of the same scenario. Yeah, but let's get to it. So we have the more viable Plasma implementation, and we've been running the testnet successfully to kind of different heights, like few thousand blocks. So we kind of feel pretty confident on doing basic transfer transactions. And if we would only launch that, I think we could have something ready in like 2 months from now that could run on production. So what do we have now? July, August, September. And but what we are after is smart contract computation, right? And in this area, actually, research hasn't finished yet. So we have hit like big limitations of smart contract computations on Plasma, which I've recently described in a blog post that says why smart contracts are not feasible on Plasma. But we still think there is a way to launch that, and that requires us to implement some additional stuff like crypto-economic aggregate signatures and a notary set. And I think that takes another 2 months to be realistically, tested well and run on a test net for a long time and so on. So September, October, November, this would be end of November, which is my realistic and pessimistic perspective.
Thank you. That's an optimistic for many users, I guess.
Woohoo. Cool.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
So, as far as I just understand, you're working remotely, right? Do you have some plans about opening offices, maybe?
I think we're pretty happy as a distributed team. It doesn't matter where you work from. It doesn't matter what time you work at. It doesn't even matter how much hours per week you contribute, as long as you kind of enjoy your work. And I think if someone wants to kind of work in an office, they can organize that by themselves, and I don't know, like either rent an office and kind of do that, or just meet in a co-working space regularly. I'm planning to do that here in Berlin with Hassan from Ledger Z. So we want to meet like once a week in Factory, which is a co-working space in Berlin. But yeah, there is no like legal entity that can open an office or something like that. We really try to keep it as a decentralized organization. Yeah.
One more question regarding regarding your token. Can you a little bit say more about the token, about the issuance, and more highlight those stuff?
Yeah. So the question is really, why do you need a token, right? Plasma chains can be operated with a deposit that is only Ether. So if the validator makes a mistake, Ether is slashed and everyone's happy. But it actually doesn't, how do you say, help to continue operating the chain. So when one validator makes a mistake, it might be so severe that the plasma chain stops. And then if everyone's bonded just in Ether, then the other validators, they just need to keep their hands up and not do anything. And they will get the deposit back because no one can prove them that they made a validation mistake. And this changes once you introduce a token, because then the validators are kind of put into an economic union, and they're responsible for each other to continue the chain. If one guy really screws up, then everyone will lose value because the token will fall to zero on the markets, right? So this incentivizes validators to slash each other's invalid blocks, and you know, constantly stay online and submit new blocks, so the chain always continues living. But it has some using a proof of stake chain has some specific requirements on tokens which most people are not aware of when they just hear about ICOs. So in proof of stake, especially if you use BFT algorithms, there's something like the 51% attack on Bitcoin. So if someone manages to acquire more than 34% of the tokens in circulation, and they can use that to bond like a lot of validators, take over like more than 33% of the slots, and attack the chain by, you know, basically stopping it. And if there is a market outside where they can short sell the token, they will make a huge profit from that. So we want to launch a chain. We want to launch a chain that has these incentives to continue running. But we also want to make sure at any time that this token is issued in a way that is secure and keeps the chain running and doesn't open this attack vector of like, you know, 51% attack. Yeah, that's all I can say about the token, I think. Pleasure talking to everyone. I think we'll close it here, and please come and watch more videos on YouTube. Thank you.